Okay, so this is part 23 of Good Omens, Saturday. It was very early on Saturday morning, on the last day of the world, and the sky was redder than blood. The International Express delivery man rounded the corner at a careful 35 miles an hour, shifted down a second, and pulled on the grass verge. He got out of the van and immediately threw himself into a ditch to avoid an incoming lorry that had barreled around the bend at something well in excess of 80 miles an hour. He got up, picked up his glasses, put them back on, retrieved his parcel and clipboard, brushed the grass and mud from his uniform, and, as an afterthought, shook his fist at the rapidly diminishing lorry. Shouldn't be allowed bloody lorries. No respect for other road users, what I always say. What I always say is remember that without a car sign, you're just a pedestrian too. He climbed down the grassy verge, clambered over the low fence, and found himself beside the river Uck. The International Express delivery man walked along the banks of the river holding the parcel. Farther down the river bank sat a young man dressed all in white. He was the only person in sight. His hair was white and his skin chalk pale, and he sat and stared up and down the river as if he were admiring the view. He looked like how Victorian romantic poets looked just before the consumption and drug abuse really started to cut it. The International Express man couldn't understand it. I mean, in the old days, it wasn't that long ago really. There had been an angler every dozen yards around the bank. Children had played there. Courting couples had come to listen to the splish and gurgle of the river, and to hold hands and to get all lovey-dovey in the Sussex sunset. He'd done that with Maud, his missus, before they were married. They'd come here to spoon, and on one memorable occasion, fork. Times changed, reflected the delivery man. Now white and brown sculptures of foam and sludge drifted serenely down the river, often covering it for yards at a stretch, and where the surface of the water was visible, it was covered with a molecule-thin petrochemical sheen. There was a loud whirring as a couple of geese, thankful to be back in England again after the long, exhausting flight across the northern Atlantic, landed on the rainbow-sliced water and sank without a trace. Funny old world, thought the delivery man. Here's the Uck, used to be the prettiest river in this part of the world, and now it's just a glorified industrial sewer. The swans sink to the bottom, and the fishes float on the top. Well, that's progress for you. You can't stop progress. He had reached the man in white. Excuse me, sir. Party name of Chalky? The man in white nodded, said nothing. He continued to gaze out at the river, following an impressive sludge and foam sculpture with his eyes. So beautiful, he whispered. It's all so damn beautiful. Delivery man found himself temporarily devoid of words. Then his automatic systems cut in. Funny old world, isn't it? And no mistake. I mean, you go all over the world delivering, and then here you are, practically in your own home, so to speak. I mean, I was born and bred round here, sir. And I've been to the Mediterranean and to Des Moines, and that's in America, sir. And now here I am, and here's your parcel, sir. Party name of Chalky took the parcel and took the clipboard and signed for the parcel. The pen developed a leak as he did so, and his signature obliterated itself as it was written. It was a long word and began with a P, and then there was the splodge, and then it ended in something that might have been ints, and might have been ocean. Much obliged, sir, said the delivery man. He walked along the river, back towards the busy road where he had left his van, trying not to look at the river as he went. Behind him, the man in white opened the parcel. It was a crown, a circlet of white metal set with diamonds. He gazed at it for some seconds, with satisfaction, then put it on, and glinted in the light of the rising sun. Then the tarnish, which had begun to suffuse its silver surface when his fingers touched it, spread to cover it completely, and the crown went black. White stood up. There's one thing you can say for air pollution. You get utterly amazing sunrises. It looked like someone had set fire to the sky, and a careless match would have set fire to the river, but alas, there was no time for that now. In his mind he knew where the four of them would be meeting, and when he was going to have and win, and he was going to have to hurry to be there by this afternoon. Perhaps he will set fire to the sky, he thought, and he left that place almost imperceptibly. It was nearly time. The delivery man had left his van on the grass verge by the dual carriageway. He walked around to the driver's side, carefully, because other cars and lorries were still rocketing around the bend, reached in through the open window, and took the schedule from the dashboard. Only one more delivery to make then. He read the instructions on the delivery voucher carefully. He read them again, paying particular attention to the address and the message. The address was one word: everywhere. Then, with his leaking pen, he wrote a brief note to Maud, his wife. It read simply, "I love you." Then he put the schedule back on the dashboard, looked left, looked right, looked left again, and began to walk purposefully across the road. He was halfway when a German juggernaut came around the corner, his driver crazed on caffeine, little white pills, and EEC transport regulations. He watched its receding bulk. Core, he thought. That one nearly had me. Then he looked down at the gutter. Oh, he thought. Yes, agreed a voice from behind his left shoulder, at least from behind the memory of his left shoulder. The delivery man turned and looked and saw it. At first he couldn't find the words, and couldn't find anything, and then the habits of a working lifetime took over, and he said, "Message for you, sir." "For me?" "Yes, sir." He wished he still had a throat. He could have swallowed if he still had a throat. "No package, I'm afraid, sir, it's a message." "Deliver it, then." "It's this, sir. Come and see." Finally, there was a grin on his face, but then, given the face, there couldn't have been anything else. "Thank you," it continued. "I must commend your devotion to duty." "Sir?" The late delivery man was falling through a gray mist, and all he could see were two spots of blue that might have been eyes and might have been distant stars. "Don't think of it as dying," said Death. "Just think of it as leaving early to avoid the rush." Delivery man had a brief moment to wonder whether his new companion was making a joke and to decide that he wasn't, and then there was nothing. Red sky in the morning. It was going to rain. Yes. Witchfinder Sergeant Shadwell stood back with his head on one side. "Right then," he said. "You're all ready. Ha' you got it all?" "Yes, sir." "Pendulum o' discovery?" "Pendulum of discovery, yes." "Thumbscrew?" He swallowed and patted a pocket. "Thumbscrew," he said. "Firelighters?" "I really think, Sergeant, that—" "Firelighters?" "Firelighters." Note for Americans and other city-dwelling life forms, the rural British having eschewed central heating as being far too complicated and in any case weakening moral fiber, prefer a system of piling small pieces of wood and lumps of coal topped by large wet logs, possibly made of asbestos, into small smoldering heaps, known as. There's nothing like a roaring open fire, is there? Since none of these ingredients are naturally inclined to burn, underneath all this they supply a small rectangular waxy white lump which burns cheerfully until the weight of the fire puts it out. These little white blocks are called firelighters. No one knows why. Said Newt sadly, "And matches." Bell, book, and candle? Newt patted another pocket. It contained a paper bag inside which was a small bell of the sort that maddens Bulgarians, a pink candle of the birthday cake persuasion, and a pink book called Prayers for Little Hands. Shadwell had impressed upon him that, although wishes were the primary target, a good witchfinder should never pass up the chance to do a quick exorcism, and should have his field kit with him at all times. "Bell, book, and candle," said Newt. "Pin?" "Pin." "Good lad, never forget your pin. It's the bayonet of your artillery light." Shadwell stood back. Newt noticed with amazement that the old man's eyes had misted over. "I wish I was going with ye," he said. "Of course it won't be anything, but it'd be good to get out and about again. It's a trying life, ye ken, all this lying in the wet bracken, spying on their devilish dancing. It gets your bones something cruel." He straightened up and saluted. "Off ye go, then, Private Pulsifer. May the armies of glorification march with ye." After Newt had driven off, Shadwell thought of something that he'd never had the chance to do before. What he needed now was a pin, not a military-issue pin, witches for the use of. Just an ordinary pin, such as you might stick in a map. The map was on the wall. It was old. It didn't show Milton Keynes. It didn't show Harlow. It barely showed Manchester and Birmingham. It had been the Army's HQ map for 300 years. There were a few pins in it still, mainly in Yorkshire and Lancashire, and a few in Essex, but they were almost rusted through. Elsewhere, mere brown stubs indicated the distant mission of a long-ago witchfinder. Chadwell finally found a pin among the debris in an ashtray. He breathed on it, abolished it to a shine, squinted at the map until he located Tadfield, and triumphantly rammed the pin home. It gleamed. Chadwell took a step back and saluted again. There were tears in his eyes. Then he did a smart-about turn and saluted the display cabinet. It was old and battered, and the glass was broken, but in a way it was the W.A. It contained the regimental silver, the inter-battalion golf trophy, not competed for, alas, in 70 years. It contained the patent muzzle-loading thunder gun of Witchfinder Colonel, "Ye shall not eat any living thing with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment nor observe times, Dalrymf." It contained a display of what were apparently walnuts, but were in reality a collection of shrunken hunter heads donated by Witchfinder C.M.S. Horace. Get them afore they get you, Narker, who'd traveled widely in foreign parts. It contained memories. Shadwell blew his nose noisily on his sleeve. Then he opened a tin of condensed milk for breakfast.